start a couple minutes early, maybe, to give Bob a little more time to explain. As you all know, the election was 8 days ago, and since then, all of the columnists and the commentators have had their say about what happened. But Kendal College is pleased to bring you this afternoon the official report. The official analysis and is prepared to tell us what this might mean. So join me in welcoming Bob Strong.
Well, thank you for that introduction. You ruined what I was going to say at the outset, which is a kind of apology. I'm not sure I know a lot more than you do. What I know about this election and what is being said about it comes from my consumption of news media. And if you choose better news organizations than I do, or better sources of information, you are going to know more or different things than I do. I'm going to try and go through a few slides fairly quickly and get more to time for your comments, time for your questions. There's a lot to be said about this election. And of course, the place to begin is with the observation that it was a clear and decisive result. That was not expected. It was thought that this would be so close, and so close in some of the swing states, that at this point after the voting, we might still not know who the winner was. But we learned early, and we learned because Trump's success was everywhere. This is a graphic I downloaded a few days ago, so it's not showing California and the West Coast, but the newest versions of this graph would fill in on the West Coast what you see in the rest of the country. These are little tiny arrows that tell you which direction a particular city or county went between 2020 and 24. They went red. They went red nearly everywhere. Trump did better in cities. Last time we talked about Philadelphia, where Hillary won that city by 83%, if I'm remembering correctly. Biden by 81%. Harris won by a little over 78%. Trump did better in urban areas and all across the country. He did slightly better in suburbs. He even found additional votes in rural communities. He did better with most of the groups we follow in our exit polls and in our analysis. Lots of people thought there was going to be a huge gender gap in this election cycle. There wasn't. It's kind of a normal gender gap. Republicans do tend to do better with men than with women. Democrats tend to do better with women than men. The span between the two is not unusually large in this cycle. Trump did better with Black voters than he did 4 years ago, or than he did 8 years ago. He did a lot better with Hispanic voters. That was something that was taken note of in 2020, and he expanded on that success, particularly with Hispanic men. He did better with younger voters than again he did 4 years ago. This was a broad-based electoral success. Now, it's not a huge majority. The polls ahead of time projected that Harris would win 48% of the vote, and she did. they projected that Trump would win roughly 48% of the vote. What was in between was unknown. What we now know is that that unknown quantity broke in Trump's direction. Political scientists are going to be really curious about why and exactly how that happened. At the moment, there are three common explanations. Trump did better with last-minute deciders. There aren't that many of them in a closely divided and highly partisan nation, but there were some. And he had the momentum at the end with that small group. Trump did better with first-time voters, winning 60+% of them. And first-time voters almost never appear in polls because the very best polls are polls of likely voters. And the definition of a likely voter is someone who voted last time or has a history of voting on a regular basis. First-time voters don't have that. They tend to get left out of those kinds of polls. And again, Trump did better with them. That's the electoral map, slightly different because the states are given a size that's representative of their population. The Nevada and Arizona should now be red. And this was, again, a few days ago before those were declared. Same kind of map, but this one from 2020, when, of course, Biden had success in the upper Midwest, in Georgia, and in Arizona. What's the explanation for this election? The simplest version is that if a sitting president has a low approval rating, and Biden did, it's hard for that president's party to win the next presidential election cycle. If you poll people and ask this really broad question, is the country headed in the right direction? And you get a large majority of people who say no, the expectation is they're going to vote for the party out of power. That's exactly what we had in 2024. And of course, it's also what we had in 2020. Trump's approval rating was underwater as we came to the polls in 2020. And the country, in the midst of a pandemic, had good reason to think we were headed in the wrong direction. It's not surprising that Trump lost 4 years ago. It's not surprising by this set of simple metrics that he won this time around. Same thing happened to Gerald Ford, same thing happened to Jimmy Carter, same thing happened to George H.W. Bush when they went into their respective elections, and this is Bush's second election, with bad economic numbers. For Ford and Carter, bad inflation, worse than we saw a few years ago, and low approval. If you have that combination, it really is difficult to succeed. And even if you have a popular president in the White House, it's hard for that popular president to pass that on to a successor. Eisenhower couldn't do it for Nixon. Clinton couldn't do it for Gore. Obama couldn't do it for Hillary Clinton. Even if the sitting president is above 50%, or well above 50%, as Eisenhower would have been, it doesn't mean that the inclination to seek change, the inclination for something new and different, is not going to be a powerful force. Here's a way of looking at what most people say, and what people said in the exit polls, was the most important issue to them, the economy. If you said, and this has 3 different election cycles, 2016, 20, and 24. If you said, the economy's great, it's excellent, it's good, I'm happy, you tended to vote for Clinton in 2016. You tended to vote for Trump in 2020. And Harris did well with people who said, the economy is excellent, I feel good about it. Harris's problem, of course, is there weren't that many people who said it's excellent and I feel good about it, right? For those who said it was poor, Trump had the advantage in 2016, and he had it back in 2024. Whether voters have a lot of sophisticated knowledge about whether the policies of one candidate or another are going to move the economy in a particular direction is hard to say. It's more likely that for many voters, it's just a sense. I'm unhappy about the economy. I want to try something else, rather than careful analysis of all the policy proposals each side puts forward. And for many people, a better way to look at the economy is not to ask people, is the nation in good shape or in bad shape? Ask them if their family is in good shape or bad shape, because everyone has a very good answer to that question, and they understand it. And here you see that for people who said, my family is better off than it was 4 years ago, same result we saw before. That helped Clinton. If you think things are better, that helped Trump in 2020. It helped Harris this time around. On the other side, if you feel that your financial circumstances are far more problematic, then it works, of course, the other way. Again, it helped Trump in 2016. It helped him even more in 2024. And of course, this has more to do, again, with how people feel than what economists would say about the current state of economic affairs. We went through a bout of really serious inflation, but efforts were made to bring it down. We normally bring down inflation by having a rip-roaring recession. That does it. We didn't do that. We had the so-called soft landing. Inflation did come down, but even for those families for whom things would have been better in 2024, they were still feeling the pain of that earlier period when the things they were buying were getting out of reach. Rather than look at just 4 years ago, 8 years ago, let me take a slightly longer view and look at the election of 1984 and this one in 2024. Ronald Reagan won 2/3 of the vote from white non-college voters. Donald Trump did exactly the same thing. Ronald Reagan won a landslide in 1984. Trump is going to end up with 51% of the vote. That's because in 1984, white non-college voters were 70% of the electorate. Today, they are less than 40%. of the electorate. In 1984, that other 30% was made up of college-educated whites, about 15% of the population, and people of color, about 15% of the population. Both of those groups have doubled in the 40 years since Reagan's landslide. College-educated whites are now roughly 30% of the electorate. Persons of color, again, roughly 30%. And that's the category that's growing. That's the category that's going to get larger as the percentage of non-college white voters continues to decline. So in 2024, Trump did better with black voters. He got 13%. For a Republican, that's a very good number. I think in 2016, he got a little over 6%. In 2020, he got something over 8%, maybe it got to 9%. He made significant gains. Again, his gains among Hispanic voters were even more dramatic. American Indians, Native Americans, are a tiny fraction of the voting population, about 1%. Trump won 65% of their vote. He also won voters who self-report modest incomes. Between 30,000 and 50,000, he won 53%. Between 50,000 and 100,000, he won 51%. Democrats won for voters who have incomes over 100,000. Democrats won for voters who have income over 200,000. This is a flip. In Ronald Reagan's day, it would have been the other way around, where he and Republicans did exceedingly well with wealthier middle class and upper class family incomes, and Democrats did considerably better with lower incomes and middle class incomes. That has changed, and probably changed because this has been a trend line in a way that's going to hold and continue in future elections. All right. I wanted to just make reference to something we've also heard, I'm sure, in the news we're consuming. What we're experiencing in the United States is not unique. In every single election held in a developed country in the last year, the party in power got hit. They either lost their share but continued to hold on to power with a smaller majority, or as in Great Britain, got kicked out by a huge swing. It was a swing against the incumbent, whether the incumbent is left or center or right of center. If you were there for COVID lockdowns, if you were there for the slow recovery of the economy after the disruptions of the pandemic, you paid a penalty in this election year. And populist parties have been doing well across Europe and really across, again, the developed nations that have held elections in the last 2 years. They don't rule in many of those countries, but their share of the vote is rising. Their seats in parliament are increasing. The populist parties did very well in the relatively recent European parliamentary elections. So that's the simple version of the script. I want to make a few more observations, and then again, invite your questions, your comments, and get some additional exchange. In the earlier lectures, I kept drawing us back to second half of the 19th century, when we had two closely divided parties, when we had contested elections, when we had political violence. And the great accomplishment of that era, and there weren't many, but the great accomplishment of that era was civil service reform. That's when I snarkily say we built the deep state. We put in place requirements that people who work for the federal government ought to be independent, they ought to have expertise, they ought to be tested, they ought to be experts. If we're going to move away from that, and I'm sure Trump will, the defense of moving away from powerful bureaucracies or too many people in Washington who control too much of our national agenda will be, we need more democracy. We need those people to be responsive to the people. We need them to follow the orders of the recently elected president. The lesson from the 19th century is that the opposite of the deep state is not democracy. The opposite of the deep state is cronyism and corruption. And I think we should be wary of where we might be headed and what consequences firing large numbers of senior civil servants, replacing them with White House choices, may turn out to be. That's, of course, a picture of Grover Cleveland, who's corralling the corruption in both political parties. He was, of course, the one president who served 2 terms separated by another. And Trump has repeated that. Grover Cleveland, of course, famously had a sex scandal. He did something really unusual in response to it. He told the truth. Imagine that. And managed to survive by that method. All right. On earlier occasions, I kept coming back to this question: were we going to have an issue election cycle or a character election cycle? It's pretty clear now we had an issue cycle. The economy and the border were the big issues for Trump, and the big issue for voters who responded to the exit polls. Abortion and threats to democracy were the big issues for Harris, and they were less important to voters than the economy. So it wasn't a character election. And there's a lot in the exit polling that's worth looking at. Voters gave Trump credit for being a leader. They said he would be someone who would bring a change. They didn't think he cared about us. They didn't think he had good judgment. There were lots of voters who said they don't approve of Trump. Again, these are vague questions that are asked in the surveys, but the way the question is worded, is this somebody you like? Lots of people who voted for Trump don't like him. They voted for him anyway. Here's another graph from the exit polling analysis. When you cast your vote, was it because you loved your candidate? Or was it because you hated the other one? And here's what happened. If you were a candidate supporter, you were really thrilled by the candidate you were voting for, you were slightly more likely to be a Trump voter. He got slightly more enthusiastic support both in 2020 and in 2024 from the people who said, the reason I cast my vote is this is the person I really want in the White House. If you answered the question, no, I voted not because I like the candidate, but because I really don't like you. I want to make sure the other person doesn't end up in the White House. You are far more likely to be a Biden voter, far more likely to be a Harris voter. Character did play a role in decisions that voters made, and the important character was Donald Trump. So, where are we going to go from here? There was a presentation yesterday at Washington Lake, and there was a student who had a really, I think, astute observation. We were talking about why voters cast their votes as they did, what can we learn from the exit polls, why did one candidate win and another lose. And the student said, I don't think that's the way to figure out if the election is important. Shouldn't we pay attention to what Trump's going to do? And he's right. We will learn how important this election is when we see his performance in a second term. Is he going to improve the economy for all of those working class families who were disappointed in the last 4 years? I see heads nodding or saying no. You've heard perhaps the same commentary I've heard. What's the best economic strategy for Donald Trump? Play golf. And the reason that's the best strategy is inflation has come down, and he can take credit for it in a few months. Job numbers are good. Our economic growth is better than our European allies. If he doesn't do anything and takes credit for an economy that's continuing to make a comeback from the slump we were in after the pandemic, that might be a good plan for him. And he wouldn't hesitate to take credit for something he didn't do. He'd be very, very skillful. If he does some symbolic tariff gains, punishes the Chinese for various offenses they have made to the world economy, he won't get in trouble for that. If he does some tariffs that help some of his wealthy friends, maybe we'll make it impossible for the Chinese to send electric cars to the United States. Some people might be happy about that. If he does a limited set of tariff policies that get a fair amount of attention, but don't change the fundamentals of the United States or the world economy, again, that might work to his advantage. If he chooses instead to do some of the things he talked about on the campaign trail, across-the-board tariffs of large dimensions, that will bring inflation back. That will disproportionately hurt poor Americans who have to consume with the money they earn, and we'll see. We'll see what he does with those choices that lie ahead for him. There's a lot he can do at the border that is needed. A lot he can do at the border that would be healthy. Harris more or less surrendered on that issue, saying I would sign the bipartisan, largely Republican, legislation that was negotiated in the Senate. If we tighten border security, that will be keeping the promise he made. It's something that he can take credit for. if we're going to deport millions of people, that's an entirely different world ahead of us. The logistics of doing that will be daunting. The issues about mixed families, parents who are undocumented, children born in the United States who are US citizens will be hard to resolve. And if they're resolved in a harsh fashion by either family separation or deporting US citizens, this is going to be hard for the American public to accept. Done at a big enough scale, it's going to turn around and hurt him on trying to maintain a healthy economy. We need the undocumented persons in the United States for the labor they contribute. We'll see how this issue develops. Will he really end the fighting in Ukraine? And when he ends it, will it be humiliation? Will it be a capitulation to Putin and his demands that is not, I suspect, what most Americans will want if that has occurred, if that occurs. Is it going to be able to prevent or resolve the current issues in the Middle East? We'll see. Oh, what did I do? I'm sorry. Okay. And that's pretty much the last slide. Let me, we'll just watch the beautiful sunset. That's better than listening. On the issue of abortion, is he going to follow what he said on the campaign? I'll leave it up to the states, and I'll leave it up to the democratic processes in states. In this election cycle, there were a number of propositions on the ballot, and as with earlier ones, they tend to get popular support for the protection of abortion rights. Is that what we're going to get on that issue? A hands-off national government and a variety of resolutions across our federal system? Or will the Republican majority, particularly in the House and Senate, have other ideas? And is that issue going to become far more problematic for Americans and also for Trump? We don't really know. And here's the last point. Is Donald Trump a threat to democracy? Is that going to come to fruition in one form or another? Excessive claims of presidential power, maybe supported by the Supreme Court. New uses of recess appointments, the example we're reading about in the papers now. Or new actions on Trump's part that return us to a kind of imperial presidency of the kind we saw in the 60s and 70s and ultimately rejected. Is he going to be that kind of threat to democracy? Or could it actually be worse than that? You know, the staff members in Trump's first White House had an odd way of speaking to each other. They referred to the Oval Office, the office where the resident desk is, and the president holds many important meetings and makes important decisions. They referred to it as Crazy Town. Now again, this isn't the media criticizing Trump, this isn't liberal Democrats criticizing Trump. These are staffers in Trump's own administration who would meet each other in the hall and say, did you have a meeting in Crazy Town? And the other person would say, no, I didn't. But I heard there was one about Homeland Security. Boy, there were some really strange things on the tape. Are we going to have a more erratic Trump? And will some of that, with fewer guardrails, turn out to be particularly dangerous? And let me both criticize Trump and soften some of those anti-democratic fears. Trump might be a would-be dictator. I think he likes power. I think he wants power. I think he knows better now than he did when he first was in the White House how to use it. But he has more ego than agenda. This is not a person who wants to change world history. This is a person who wants the world to watch him on television. And we may be, in some sense, protected by his ego. He may be less dangerous than Putin or an Orban or some of the other individuals he's sometimes compared to. Moreover, he cares about public opinion. Even the public opinion by the media organizations he hates. He doesn't just watch fake news or Fox News. He watches fake news. He watches both. And he cares what both think about him. When the separation of children from their families at the border took place and produced widespread public condemnation, Trump immediately backed down and said, that wasn't my policy, that was Obama. We were only doing what he did. That's not true, but he backed down. Are we going to be again protected from the worst things that might happen in Crazy Town by his own desire to please the public? Is he as dangerous as the Democrats and critics of his first administration said? Or can we expect to both survive the next 4 years and in some cases get good policy outcomes from them? I think that question is still open. And though I'm one of those people suspicious of Trump and what he will do with the power he now has, I at least have some sense that he may exercise some degree of self-restraint by the ego, the desire to be popular, and the response he's likely to make to a public outrage by particular courses of action. I'm going to stop there and say that you shouldn't give much credence to my judgment about how bad things are going to be. You should form your own. And I do think that's an important question that's now on the national agenda. So, what would you like to talk about? What would you like me to try to respond to? Yes.
J.D. Vance, what if he becomes the one in power?
All right. That's related to another discussion that's ongoing about this election. It's a modest victory, but a clear victory for MAGA. And Vance is a logical successor to Donald Trump. Is this going to be seen in the future as a turning point election, right? In which MAGA will continue to hold power and maybe even grow? Or will this be another one of the close elections from which the other party recovers? 2 years from now, it's the House of Representatives going to flip back to Democratic control and set things up for another close election cycle. We don't know how the public is going to move. We do know they took a significant step in the MAGA direction. And if that's our future, we're going to have a dominant Republican Party. Then I think people need to pay attention to Vance and the other people who will come forward as Trump's possible successors. Related to that is an issue that's being debated by lots and lots of people. Is this really what the American public is going to want for a long period of time, or is it the attraction to a particular person, a particular candidate? Trump has those extraordinary communication skills. He is not a politician. He is has been able to use his celebrity status. He doesn't know a lot about public policy, but he knows a lot about public relations. Is he a unique figure? And his passing will take us back to a more normal kind of politics? Or is he riding a wave that's going to continue after him? I have no idea which of those views we should take. But you all, I think we all should pay attention to, if this is the new wave, who follows Trump? Yes, sir.
You've spent a good bit of your time over the years interviewing capable, serious people that have been in past administrations. And then you just reference Trump's Oval Office as crazy town.
Yes.
With capable, serious people there with him. Do you have any thoughts on what we're hearing about the proposed appointments for serious positions in the Trump administration?
Well, the question was, what about the people he's named so far? And what kind of cabinet, what kind of staff is he likely to have? And you know, the comments by Kelly, they got a lot of attention. I think Trump fits the definition of a fascist. Were pretty dramatic. But the more common observations made about Trump in his first term is that he doesn't know anything. Rex Tillerson was right. You know? There was John Bolton was on television this weekend on a podcast and talked about conversation between Trump and Theresa May, and the subject of British nuclear forces came up. And Trump's response was, "Oh, Theresa, do you have nuclear weapons?" And Bolton put that forward as one of a long string of examples he has given about, I can't believe the President of the United States, and a president who had served for several years, right, doesn't know that. Now, it doesn't mean Trump lacks intelligence. I think that's a big mistake. No. He just uses his intelligence for different things. He uses it to invent insults. He uses it to manipulate the news cycle. He He has what I've sometimes called tabloid intelligence. If Donald Trump was in the grocery line with you, which he would never be, he would never be there, but if he were in the grocery line with you and he looked at the array of magazines and newspapers, he would know which one was going to sell out. And he would know which publisher made a mistake of putting that person on the cover. He is attuned to a variety of things, and in the things he cares about, making money, getting publicity, he is enormously skilled. But on a whole lot of matters of public policy, he's indifferent and uninformed and not much interested in the staff members who tried to spend half a day giving him the history of NATO. That was the meeting that he was in when Tillerson came out and said, he's a moron. He's not moronic, but he really doesn't care about the history of the NATO alliance. We've never had a president like that. Nobody ever called Richard Nixon a moron on an issue of public policy. He read all the briefing books. He usually knew them better than his cabinet officers and the people he was interacting with. He had a darker side. He had his own political maneuvers and the like. But he was extremely knowledgeable. And that's common. Ronald Reagan was extremely knowledgeable about a handful of issues that he cared about deeply. Cold War, taxes making the government smaller. He did not have a wide range of policy interests, but for the things he cared about, he knew a lot. Those are typical presidents. Donald Trump is not typical. Yeah.
To what extent do you think the Democrats will be able to block some of the key issues that Trump wants to get through Congress by use of the filibuster in the Senate?
Well, if they succeed in blocking some of the things he wants to do by the filibuster, Trump will put pressure on the Senate majority that can change the rule and eliminate it. I think the filibuster, which is already on for Supreme Court nominees and for other selected issues, is in real jeopardy. If he doesn't get what he wants, he'll have to put pressure on its elimination. Then the question will be, are there Republicans in the Senate who care about the Senate and care about its history, care about its prestige, know that they will someday return to being in the minority and appreciate the filibuster? Will they stand up to Trump in that circumstance? I wouldn't hold my breath. So I think we could have some real issues in that connection. More comments, more questions? Please.
Back here.
Yes.
On the Democratic side, some people were opposed to how much the left flank and some of the policies came in. What do you see coming maybe on changes on that more liberal agenda?
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to what the Democrats are saying, they are saying Harris was too liberal. That's what she was. Harris wasn't moderate enough. That's why she lost. We talked too much about that democracy issue before. We didn't talk about it nearly enough. We should have been calling him a fascist sooner and louder. They don't know yet what transpired. And I think that, at least in my judgment, in the extraordinarily unusual circumstances that Harris was in, she ran a very good campaign. There were not serious mistakes. There was a rapid coalescing around her, and then this really hard thing to do, to take her staff and some of Obama's old staff and integrate it with the Biden crew and make everybody work together. They raised a lot of money. They ran a lot of ads. She was well prepared for the debate. And I don't think you can hang it on a mistake she made on The View when she didn't distance herself enough from Biden or any of the other minor errors she may have made. It was a well-run campaign, and Democrats came close and fell short. It wasn't, Democratic Party wasn't wiped out. Here's some other good news from 2024. We're back to ticket splitting. It wasn't that long ago we said we're such a partisan country. Everyone is either red or blue and nothing else. Well, in some of the states that voted for Trump, they also voted for Democrats to take seats in the Senate. Didn't our senator outperform Harris? Yes, Kane must have. He must have. Was it a big margin or a small one? But we are seeing more people ticket splitting. That's good. And again, we are seeing the Republican Party do a better job of competing for Black voters, competing for Latino voters, competing for voters of modest income. Donald Trump's campaign must have had an excellent office of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those people were great. They got him out there, and they got real progress with groups that were presumed to be in the Democratic camp. Yes.
Why do you think Americans are so wary of having a woman president? Yeah. That puzzles me all the time. Look at all the other countries who have women president.
Yeah. Yep. Well, again, are we going to get voters to admit that that was why they did not vote for Harris? I don't know whether we will learn how big a factor that may have been. And I certainly hope we don't reach the conclusion that America really wants a misogynist. That's the best possible president. I think for lots and lots of voters, Trump was lesser evil. What was it that was evil about the Democratic side? Maybe too much identity politics, maybe too much of a hidden liberal agenda, maybe Harris insincere and shifting as she did from some of her more liberal California positions to some of her more moderate Biden positions. I don't think Harris's failure to win will discourage future women candidates or discourage parties from nominating them. But you have a point. You really have a point. We are way behind the rest of the world.
It's when you think about the Latino vote and also the Black vote and that went to Trump.
Well,
And they were courted by Harris, who was trying to, I guess, to promote diversity.
Well, of course, Harris wins the vast majority of African American votes, but Trump did that, and deserves some credit for that. hadn't been better, and did dramatically better with Latino voters, both in 2020 and in 2024. If the Republican Party did not succeed in doing that, the path of demographic change has them on the path of being a permanent minority party. But they have done that. And they are clearly competitive. Yes?
What do you see as the future of the appointment of the judicial positions? And how that's going to influence
Well,
repeat the question.
the question is judicial appointments.
Repeat the question.
The question was, what's the future of judicial appointments likely to be? We saw what Trump did 4 years ago. We will get more of the same. I am worried about conservative judicial activism. There's no constitutional basis for presidential immunity. The Constitution says explicitly, after you're impeached, you can face criminal penalty. The founders talked about it all the time, right? They knew the first president was going to be George Washington, and they didn't have to worry. But they knew someday we'll have somebody who isn't George Washington. They even had a name for it in some of the newspaper articles. They talked about General Slushing. What are we going to do when that comes along? And it was for that reason we need separation of powers. It was for that reason we need limitations on the president. For that reason, we need an impeachment process that has been diluted by the cases from Clinton on. So we're going to get more conservative judicial appointments. Trump will probably get at least one more, who knows, to the Supreme Court in his coming term, and it's going to make a big difference. Yes, sir.
In years past, I was able to discuss with my Republican friends differences in the economy, those kinds of things. To me, it now seems that the issue is more of morals, sensitivity, those kinds of issues. How would you suggest we talk with our folks who do not agree with us with me in terms of those kinds of issues?
I think about that a lot. I hold myself to blame for not being better at those kinds of conversations myself. For a long time, I have described myself as a flaming moderate. For a while, I called myself a neo-moderate. A neo-moderate is someone who doesn't care about either extreme, but desperately wants to be popular. It's hard for me to talk to both sides. We all need to work harder at those conversations. Boy, I've just ruined Thanksgiving tonight. We all need to work harder at those conversations. And of course, not do crazy labeling. You're not a racist if you voted for Donald Trump. Now, David Duke probably did vote for Donald Trump, and he probably cornered racist vote. But we're not millions and millions and millions of racist voters in the United States. I'm really curious. I'd love to ask people, what is it you wanted from Trump? What did you see in him? And what I usually get in that conversation is a critique of both political parties and a critique of all of politics. he's not a regular politician, and yeah, he's crude in what he says. And I'm ready for things to be shaken up. If you voted for Donald Trump to shake things up, you cast a smart vote. You are going to get what you voted for, and finding out for people that was part of their reason is worth doing, worth exploring. And there are moral questions about his behavior. I do think we're gonna see a fair amount of corruption, and people are gonna have to answer: is that the price of doing business in Washington, or is that something I'm really opposed to? And the other issue about which I have endless awkward conversations is January 6th. That's a real decider. How you come down on that is important. Liz Cheney is a research fellow at the same place where I'm working now in Charlottesville. She only shows up twice a semester, but that's all right. She's the sort of premier example of what turns out to be a relatively small number of voters, right? The premier example of, I don't agree with Harris's policies, but giving aid and support or leading an insurrection was a step too far, and I am now and forever adamantly opposed to Donald Trump for that reason. For the people who excuse it, for the people who say it was okay, those are really hard conversations. I didn't answer your question, I'm sorry.
I don't know that there is one.
There's a gentleman in back, yes, sir.
As a flaming moderate, what is your reaction to the appointment of Congressman Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General?
Is that news?
Yes. That is correct.
Oh, I should not have been practicing for this talk. I think there's a crazy town in Mar-a-Lago. Are we done?
There you go.
Bob, I don't think we're done. I think there's a lot more to talk about, and you've opened our eyes to a lot of the issues that we will have to worry ourselves with and to watch as the Trump presidency. Realize he's not even officially been elected president yet, but he's got this cabinet filled with strange appointments already.
Weird.
What?
Weird.
Weird. There'll be a lot to think about and talk about as this goes on, because he's told the American people he's going to appoint people who are loyal to him. In his first term, he didn't know anybody much except people who were close to him. And he had to fill a cabinet, and he appointed people that he knew nothing about. And many of them were on that group of 800 or something Republican office holders or cabinet people who said they weren't going to vote for Trump because he would be a danger to the country. In any event, let me say, Bob, we appreciate very much what you've done for us, both in your two earlier talks as well as in today's talk. You are the final lecturer we're having as part of a Kendal College series this year. We'll have some more for you next year, and I will mention the first two programs we have coming up in 2025 next week when we have the Resident Association meeting here. I'll tell you about how we're going to start next year. But you have finished up this year for us in splendid fashion. Thank you.